Hello everyone, Vector241 here, back with another tutorial. In this tutorial I'll be showing you how to do modal forms, or how to send and receive modal forms, message forms and action forms to the player. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So first of all, what you want to do is you want to open up your add-on that already has Script API enabled. Now, if you do not have an add-on that has Script API, or you do not know what Script API is, or how to use it, I suggest you watch the Script API tutorial, which was an earlier video that I did, that shows you how to set up your add-on with the Script API, and also how to use it. But in this video, I'll just be showing you how to create modal forms, generate them, and send and receive those modal forms. So, the first thing that we want to do is we want to make sure our server UI modal form is available for us. And to check that, all we have to do is just go into manifest.json and just see under dependencies that we've got the server-UI module enabled. So once you have that pretty much set up, if you do not have this in here, what we need to do is we need to import the modules. So just like in the previous tutorial, all we have to do is just type in the import. Then since we aren't going to import anything currently, we just put in our curly brackets, and then we just do from at Minecraft/server-UI. Then the other thing that we want to import is the world and system class. Now I'll explain a bit about why we want to import the system class. But for now, we'll just import these from the server module. So just like the previous tutorial, we just import the world and system from at Minecraft/server. And that is pretty much all we need to do to get started. Now, let's move on to the first form that we are going to create, which is an action form. Now, with the action form, inside the Script API documentation, if we click on action form data, we can see here that we've only got a couple of methods here. We've got a title method, we've got a show method, a button method, and a body method. Now, the action form data class is a pretty simple form. All this form does is it allows you to send pretty much a list of buttons with an icon of your choosing. And with that, all it does is it just sends this form to the player, and then as soon as the player clicks on a button, it'll just return what button they clicked on. So, with that being said, we need to import this action form data class. And to do this, all we have to do is inside your script, you just need to import the action form data class from the server UI module, because the action form data class is actually part of the server-UI module right here. So what we have to do is inside these curly braces, just type in action form data, and that's pretty much all we need to do. Now, the next thing that we need to do is we need to create the form. And to create the form, we need to declare a new instance of the action form data. Now, if you do not know what instances are in JavaScript, please either take a JavaScript tutorial from a different video, since I won't be explaining any JavaScript logic or basics in this tutorial. So with that being said, all we have to do is just create the action form data class. And to do this, all we have to do is just type in const form is equal to new action form data. And that is pretty much all we need to do to create this new form. Now, the next thing that we need to do is we need to set a title and fill it with buttons, or we just need to fill it with buttons or set body or whatever you want to do with this. And to do this, we can do it via two ways. The first way is we can just do form dot button or title or body, or the second way, which is what I like doing, is getting rid of that semicolon, and then the next line down we can do dot, and as you can see here, we've got access to the exact same functions. So since we're going to be setting the title first, we just do title, and since the title is an actual method, we just put in a bracket, or these non-special brackets, and then we just need to set our title with a string. So with these apostrophes, we can just do example title. Next, we need to add a button. Now, the thing with action form data is you need to fill them in with buttons. If you do not fill them in with a single button, then the entire show function will error out and will most likely pretty much crash your script. So all we need to do is just on the next line down, we can just do dot button, and in this button we can set a title for the button. So this is the pretty much the message that is shown on the button. So right now I'm just going to set it to example button. Then the next thing that we can do is we can set an icon next to the button. Now you can just leave this blank, which is what I'm going to do here. But if you wanted to fill this in with an actual image, basically the image that you want to reference, it would be inside your resource pack. So if we were to reference an image, all we have to do is we just need to define pack_icon.png if we want to use image. However, if your image is inside another folder, we just need to do folder / whatever your image name is here. And every time you declare a button, it'll always pretty much reference your resource pack. If you try and reference anything from the behavior pack, this will not work because the behavior pack is pretty much ran on the server, and it'll try and get the image from the client. So with that being said, since we are not going to be using this icon at all, we can just remove that, and we can just add our semicolon here to finish this off. Now, the next thing that we need to do is we need to show the form to the actual player. And to do this, we need to subscribe to an event that we can then show the form to the actual player. Now, there are two ways that we can go about this. First way is we can use an item use event, or we can use any other event except for the chat send event. Now, the reason why we can't use the chat send event is that the player who sends a chat message can't actually see the form as soon as they chat. Now, I'll be showing you why a bit later, but for now, I'll just be using the item use event. So, with that being said, we'll subscribe to the item use event by doing world dot before events dot item use dot subscribe. And then since we want the event data, we just do ev, then our basic callback function, and we're pretty much done with this event. Now, next thing that we need to do is we need to show the form to the player. And to achieve this, we use the show function that is part of the action form data for the form. So we can just do form.show. And then since we want to send it to the player that has used the item, we can just do ev.source. And that's pretty much what you need to do. However, before we jump ahead, there is one thing that we need to consider. And that is, we need to consider whether we are using a before event or an after event. Now, the difference between the before event and the after event is before events allow us only to use event data in a read-only mode, as explained here. If we were to use an after event, this would work fine, but since we are using a before event, this will pretty much error, saying that we cannot use form.show because we are in read-only mode. Now, I'll show you what this error looks like in a bit. So, if you have this set up, all we need to do is we can just go to Minecraft, type in /reload. So we are reloading our scripts. Then we can just pick any item. So for this example, I'll just be doing a wooden sword. And then just right click on this item. Now, as you can see here on the top, we've got the error saying that native function actionFormData.show does not have required privileges at anonymous main.js9. Now, this is basically just telling us that we do not have access to modifying variables in read-only mode. And that's pretty much what form.show does. So, to fix this, we make the use of system.run, which is why we imported it in the first place. So all we have to do is inside your script, we just need to wrap form.show inside the system.run. And system.run just basically takes whatever the event data that we have outside of read-only mode. So this is pretty useful for us to use if you want to modify data in a before event. So if you have the setup like this, system.run with our bracket or normal brackets, and system.run is an actual function, we just use the normal brackets. Then we do our basic callback, and then all we have to do is just copy and paste the form.show inside the system.run. Now, this should actually work for us. So, let's go on back to Minecraft, type in /reload, and there is our form. Our form has popped up, and we can click buttons and we can exit out of it, or we can just do all the sorts of other stuff. However, our form pretty much doesn't do anything at the moment. So, let's make this do something. So, back in Bridge, we just need to, we can add another button. So for this example, I'll just be adding 2 buttons. So button, example, button 2. And then we just want to take our submitted form after we show the player the form. Now to do this, form.show is an asynchronous function. Now if you do not know what asynchronous is, I suggest you research it up, since it's pretty much a basic programming concept. However, to explain it simply, asynchronous is pretty much something that doesn't run synchronously or pretty much in order as what we specify. So, with that being said, we need to listen for this asynchronous event. And to do this, there are two ways that we can do it. The first way is we can declare this callback inside our before event, or our subscription to the before event. So we can use the await modifier, or the await declaration. So we await for the show function to finish, and then we return. However, this does actually freeze the server and will probably crash your server. So we don't want to use the await. The second way that I'm going to show you how to do it, which is the proper way, is to use the .then. And with this .then, it allows us to listen for the show event and then use the data from this function without blocking the server. So, with that being said, we just use the .then function, and then we're going to just type in res for response, short for response, and then we do our basic callback, and we are ready to start using this form or this response. Now, if we look at the res dot, we can see here that we've got three variables. We've got cancellation reason, and basically what cancellation reason does is it just tells us whether the player, if we go back into Minecraft, whether they've clicked on this X or whether they've exited out of the form using escape. So if you wanted to do something fancy with that, you can. However, we aren't going to use that, and it's not really used for anything important. So we can just leave that be. The second thing that we're going to look at is the cancelled variable. Now this just returns a boolean, which is a true or false statement. And this just tells us whether the player clicked a button or whether they exited out of the form. Now this is pretty important, since if we are generating our form, we don't want to do anything if the form was cancelled. If it's cancelled, we could do a different action. But since this is an example, we don't really want it to do anything when the form is cancelled. So with this in mind, we can just return as soon as the form is cancelled. So to do this, all we have to do is just if res got cancelled, then we just return. Then any code that we write after this res.cancelled, will basically run if the player actually clicked on a button. So, to get the value of the button that was selected, we just use res.selection. Now res.selection pretty much returns what button that the player pressed. And this is pretty much a number or an integer. Now, with selection, it counts the same way as what an array does. So from 0 to whatever. So with that in mind, let's say for example, if the player clicked the first button, this would be number 0. So this would be 0. And then if the player clicked the second button, this would be number 1. So with this in mind, what we need to do is we need to do if res dot selection is equal to 0, we can do a console.warn selected 0. Else, we can just do console.warn selected 1. And that is pretty much all we need to do to check what button the player pressed. So let's head on over to Minecraft and see how this works in game. So in Minecraft, all we have to do is just type in /reload. So we reload our script. And then once we right click on our sword or the item that you're holding, you can see that we've got our updated form here. And as soon as I click on the first button, it should say on the top, selected 1 or 0. I believe it was just 0, yes. Okay. So as soon as I click on this first button, it should say selected 0. And then as soon as I click on the second button, it should say selected 1. And then if I were to exit this form, it does nothing. So, looks like our form is actually working. Now, next thing that I will show you how to do is how to actually generate the form. So, for this example, I'll just be generating the form with the amount of players or a player selector form for this action form. So, let's get into it. So, the first thing that we want to do is we want to generate our form as soon as the event is ran. And to do this, all we have to do is just move our action form data inside the event. So we can just delete that and do const form is equal to new action form data. And then we're just going to set the title. So for our title, we'll just be doing player selector. And then if we want to set a body, I'll just be doing a body, for example, and then select the player you want to select or something like that. Now, the second thing that we want to do is we want to save the event data or save the player that executed this event. And to do this, we just do const player is equal to ev.source. So basically we're just saving the player into a variable so we can use it later outside of this event. But if you were to use ev.source inside this form.show.then, it will not work because the event data will no longer exist after it's exited out of the event. So we need to actually save it into a variable or whatever you name it, and then we can just use it later. Now, the second thing that we need to get is the players from the world. Now to do this, we can just use const players is equal to world.get all players. And this will just return a list of players for us to use later down the track. Now, the reason why I'm doing it this way is, for example, world.get all players can actually change as soon as a player submits a form. So, for example, if you were to use world.getAllPlayers and generate your form, and then as soon as the player returns or responds or submits the form, if world.getAllPlayers does not match what was generated, because the form doesn't change live, then you're pretty much going to have an error and it'll crash the script. So to prevent this, we just save whatever we got, and then we'll just use later as soon as the player submits the form. So hopefully that made sense, and let's actually get to generating this form. Now to generate the form, all you have to do is just loop through the players that was returned inside this variable. And to do that, we just use for let I is equal to 0, I is lower than players dot length, then I plus plus. Then every time we do a loop, we just add a button to the form. And to do this, we just do form dot button, and then we'll just set the text of the button to the player name. So to retrieve our player, we just do players I, so we can get the player that we are currently accessing through this loop, and then we just do dot name. And that's pretty much all you need to do. So with that done, next thing that we need to do is we need to respond to the actual data. But for now, I'm just going to test this in game and see if the form actually generates for us. So in Minecraft, I am just going to do /reload, and then just right click on the sword. And as you can see, my name popped up here, but currently it doesn't really do anything at the moment. So let's actually make this do something. So back in Bridge, or your script, inside form.show.then, and you've got your basic setup. All we need to do is we just need to do player, or say const selected player is equal to players res dot selection. So pretty much we are just getting the player from the button that was pressed. That's pretty much what this does here. And then we're just saving this value into a variable. Then the next thing that we can do is we can do player dot send message. So we can just send the player name to the player. That's what we're going to do here. And then we just do selector player dot name. And that's pretty much all you need to do with this. And hopefully this will all work properly. So back in Minecraft, we just do /reload, right click, and then as soon as I click on my name, it should say my name in chat. So hopefully that gave you an in-depth explanation as to how to use these action forms and to generate these. There is a lot more that you can do with these forms. For example, if I wanted to teleport the player or the selected player, we could just do selected player dot teleport. And then since we are doing a vector 3, we just need to import the vector 3. And then we can just do new vector 3. Let's see if I can actually use it. Looks like it doesn't actually accept it for some odd reason. Yeah, looks like it doesn't seem to work. So we could probably just do something else. For example, we could do, let's say, set on fire, and then we can do 5 seconds. And so that now that we have that set up, we can just do /reload, and then as soon as I click on my name, I should be on fire. That's if I'm not in creative mode. There we go. That seems to work. So that is just some of the stuff that you can do with the action form data. But hopefully that gave you a basic understanding of how to generate the actual form and how to handle the responses that you get from the form. So let's move on to the 2 other forms that I'll be showing you how to create and respond to. Let's get into it. So the first thing that I'll be showing you is how to create the message form data class and how to sort of use it. So with that being said, first thing that you want to do is you want to import your message form data, as I've already got here. Second thing that you want to do is you want to create your form. So to do this, we just do const form is equal to new message form data, and we can just set our title just like before in the action form data. So we can just do example form. Then the second thing that we want to set is our buttons. Now, button 1 and button 2 are pretty much accept and deny buttons, and these are static buttons. So for example, you can't have 2 button 1s and you can't have 1 button 2 or 2 button 2s. There is only one of each. Since the message form data is pretty much an accept or deny form, or like a yes or no answer pretty much to the player. So for our accept button, we need to use button 2. Now, for some reason, button 1 isn't the accept button, since this is the actual last button that is used. So since we want our accept button to be at the top, we'll just be using button 2. And then we just do accept. Then for our deny button, we use button 1, and we just do deny. Then the next thing that you can set is your body. So we could just say body, let's say invite, or say accept invite from player, and then accept and deny. So now that we have our form set up, we just need to show the form to the player. So just like before, we just do system.run, and we do our basic callback. Then we just do form.show, and we just do eb.source. So with that done, we can go into Minecraft and see how this works. So once you're in Minecraft, all you have to do is just type in /reload. And once you've reloaded your script, you can see here that we've got the accept form. Now, if we were to do the accept, it pretty much doesn't really do anything at the moment. So let's actually make this form do something. So back in Bridge, all we need to do is we just, like before, just do .then res equals over to our basic callback, and then if res.cancelled, let's see if I can do it properly, we just return. Else, we check if the player pressed the accept button. Now the accept button is value number 1, and our deny button is value number 0. So to get whether the player accepted or denied the button, we just do if res.selection is equal to 1, which is our accept button, we just do console.warn accepted invite, else we do console.warn denied invite. And that is pretty much all we need to do, or we need to accept from this form. So back in Minecraft, we just type in /reload, and as soon as I click on accept, it should say accepted invite, and then as soon as I click on deny, it says denied invite on the top left. So that's pretty much all the message form does. Basically, it's just mostly used for TPA requests or invite form requests or confirmation messages. There's not much fancy stuff that you can do with this. It's mostly just used for an accept or deny modal form. So let's move on to the last and most difficult form, which is the modal form that allows us to add drop downs, sliders, and toggles and text fields. So let's move on to that. So the last but not least is the modal form data class. Now with the modal form, we can create drop downs, we can create a slider, we can create a text field, and we can create a toggle. Now this gives us pretty much a lot more control over what data that we expect from the player. Now we can actually just add as many things. For example, we could have 2 text fields, and we could have 2 toggles or 2 drop downs or 3 sliders, however many that you want as needed. But for now, I'll just be showing you how to create each and every single one of these inputs. So back in Bridge, all we have to do is just import the modal form data class. So just like before, we just do the import, then we create our form. So just like before, we just do const form is equal to new modal form data. Then we just set our title. So we just do example form. Then the next thing that we want to do is we are going to create each of the inputs. So the first input that I am going to create is the toggle. Now with this variable, it just is pretty much a label next to the input, and it just tells what the player is what the input is for. So for our toggle, we're just going to do example toggle. Then the next thing that we're going to create is the text field, and this just basically allows the player to input text into the form. So we could just do example text field. Then the next thing that we need to input into this text field is the placeholder text. So something that appears for the player. Now you do need to actually fill this in. It's not nullable for some odd reason. So we do need to actually set something here. So in this, we're just going to do example placeholder. Now that's pretty much all we need to do. Next is we'll create the slider, and with the slider we'll just say example slider for the label. Then the minimum value, which just defines how low slider can go. So for our minimum value, we'll just be doing at 0. Then the maximum value is pretty much how high the slider can go. So we'll just be setting this at 10. Then the value step is the increment, how the slider increments. Now, if we were to set this to 2, the slider would increment in 2s. So it will be 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. And then if I were to do 3, it will be 3, 6, 9. And then for 4, it will be 4, 8, and then 5 and 10. But since for this example, I'm just going to do 1. So it will increment by 1 every time this slider moves. Next is we are going to create the dropdown. Now for our dropdown, we'll just be doing example dropdown, the label, and then the options. Now with the options, this takes in an array of strings, and these will act as the dropdown or the options that are in the dropdown. So we're just going to put 2 options into this dropdown. So we'll just be saying option 1, and we'll just put option 2 into this array that I have here. And that is pretty much our modal form created. Now let's see this in action. So, like before, we just use the system.run, then our basic callback. Then we just do form.show, ev.source, and our form should be ready to show. So, back in Minecraft, we just type in /reload. So we know our script is loaded properly. And then as soon as we right click on our item, we can see that we've got a bunch of stuff. So we've got our example toggle, like defined at the very start that we have here. And then we've got our text field and we've got our slider. Now, the way that you create each and every single one of these fields is important for when you respond to the form when it's submitted. So for example, if I had this toggle on the second line, we can see here that we've got a toggle on the below our text field. And if we were to respond to this form, it would be the exact same way or the exact same format as what we sent. So for example, if we wanted to get the text field, we would be getting the value at the first value. But if we were to move our toggle at the start, our value is no longer at the first start, but it's actually the second value. So hopefully that actually makes sense, and hopefully that pretty much explains what you need to know about the modal forms. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to respond to this form. So back in Bridge, we just use our .then for our form.show, so we can respond to this form. Then if res.cancelled, if I can type properly, there we go. If I didn't even put in the if, so if res.cancelled, then we return. Else, we need to get the values for this form. Now there are 2 ways that we can do this. The first way is we can do const toggle value is equal to res.form values, then 0 to get our toggle, because our toggle is the first input that we created it at. But there is a more efficient way that a lot of regular JavaScript people that use. And that way is to use an array of the values, or an array of each and every single value. So we just remove that 0 that I just created there, And then for this toggle value, we're going to change this to an array. So we are pretty much accessing the array of this. Then we're going to assign each value for this array into a variable. And for each variable, it's going to pretty much come out in the exact same order as what we created up here. So since we are accessing our first value, it'll be our toggle value. So we are accessing our toggle value. The second one that we're going to access is our text field, so our text. Then the second thing that we're going to access is our slider. And then the third one that we're going to access is our drop down, so drop down. And that is pretty much the more efficient way, or the better way to do this, or to get the values from the form. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to read each value from this form. And to do this, we're just going to do console.warn. So we print it out into the console. And then we're going to use these special backticks. And then we just do toggle. And then toggle value. Then text field. Text field. Slider. Slider. And then drop down. Drop down. And that is pretty much all we need to do to read each and every single value from the form. So, back in Minecraft, we just type in /reload. Then as soon as I click on submit, we should see here that we've got all of our values on the top left. So if I were to put something inside the text field, we can see here that under the text field, we can see that we've got what I typed in. So we can just change a lot of stuff here. For example, we could do that, change all of this around, and we can see here that we've got all of this stuff that we have. Now with the drop down, you can see here that it returns an integer. That's pretty much the same as what we were messing with the action form. So since the second option that we selected is 1, we can see here that option 2 is number 1 and option 1 is number 0. So to test this out, we've got option 1 and we can see here that drop down is 0. And if we selected option 2, it will be drop down 1. So hopefully that makes sense. You pretty much handle it the same way as you do with the action form, except it's pretty much inside of the form value. So hopefully that made enough sense for you all, and hopefully you learnt how to create your own action forms, generate them, and how to handle each and every single value of each one. So in the next tutorial, I'll be doing chat commands, and I'll be showing you how to create your own system with chat commands. So with that being said, I will see you in the next tutorial. Bye!